Sorry again.
And
Sorry.
who is iPhone?
Okay, so I'm gonna continue.
Go ahead.
So how bronze was made and general information about the Bronze Age, which is Mesopotamia by the Sumer. Major battles preceding the collapse, the Battle of Kaddish, battle with the Sea People. These are going to be referenced a lot in the later topics. So I like to introduce them so everybody is familiar with these events. And then the major empires before the collapse, which is the Assyrian Empire, which survived the collapse, Babylon Empire, Mycenaean Greece, Hittite Empire, Kingdom of Egypt, which also survived the collapse back then. However, the Syrian Empire and Egypt survived, but they have become much smaller and weakened. Then we're going to go into the Greek Dark Ages. Because I think there a huge collapse in that area. And then the fall of the Messini Empire is also very important. It's probably the point in history that marks the beginning of the Greek Dark Ages and also the Bronze Age collapse. Then we're going to go to the other areas, Anatolia, this Troy and Hattusa, Cyprus, Kingdom of Alashia, Syria, Ugarit, and Kaddish, Southern Levant. And then we're going to talk about the possible causes of the collapse. Some could be environmental, culture, and then there's a general system collapse theory. Then I'm going to give a bonus chapter on Bronze Age in China. We're going to talk about the Shang and Zhou dynasty, which is the earliest example of bronze in China, and the two sites, the early Tao and Sanxing Dui, that have the earliest bronze artifact. All right. So, so how was bronze made? Bronze is made by smelting copper and alloying it with tin, arsenic, or other metal. Bronze was harder and more durable than other metals at that time, and therefore gained a technology advantage. But it was not easy to make. Iron is abundant, but the high smelting point at 2,800 Fahrenheit was not easy to make. Until around 3000 BC, they figured out adding tin, which has a low smelting point at 400.
China was one of the best countries in the whole entire world. Just
John Smith. Get rid of John Smith.
John Smith is gone. 1 second. Okay, sorry guys. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Zach, do you think you want to just mute everyone for now?
Yeah, let me mute everybody. I apologize. 1 second, guys.
Okay.
And then I'll just unmute you.
And then I'll open up for comments. Yeah. All right. Going back. Until around 3000 BC, adding tin, which has low smelting point at 449 Fahrenheit, and adding it to copper would have a lower temperature, which was much easier to create bronze. Tin copper ores are rare because there was no tin in Western Asia until about 3000 BC when trade began. I would like to talk a little bit about the fire, how they reach the high temperature of the smelting point. It's either created by using wood, coal, or natural gas. Wood is probably not going to be enough to produce such a high temperature, but the use of coal and natural gas are the most possible. Now I'm gonna go to where did tin come from, and that's referred to the map, share map in the Zoom. So due to the scattered nature of tin deposits around the world and its essential nature for creating the tin bronze, tin trade played an important role in the development of cultures throughout ancient times. Archaeologists have reconstructed parts of the extensive trade networks of ancient culture from the Bronze Age using historical texts, archaeology excavations, and trade elements, and led isotope analysis to determine the origin of tin objects around the world. Known sources of tin in ancient times include the Sultan tin bill that runs from Yunnan, China to the Malay Peninsula, Cornwall and Devon in Britain, Brittany in France, the border between Germany and Czech Republic, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Central and South Africa. Syria and Egypt have been suggested as minor sources of tin, but the archaeological evidence is inconclusive. The importance of tin to the success of Bronze Age culture and the scarcity of the resource offers a glimpse into the time period's trade and cultural interactions, and has therefore been the focus of intense archaeology studies. However, a number of problems have plagued the study of ancient tin, such as the limited archaeology remains of destruction of ancient mines by modern mining operations and the poor preservation of pure tin objects. These problems are compounded by the difficulty in improving tin objects and ores to their geological deposits using isotopic or trace elements analysis. In Northern Asia, the only tin deposits considered exploitable by ancient people occur in the far eastern region of Siberia. This source of tin appears to have been exploited by the Eurasian steppe culture. If anyone who is not familiar with the Eurasian steppe culture, it is a Eurasian steppe extends thousands of kilometers from near the mouth of Danube River almost to the Pacific Ocean. It is bounded on the north by the forests of European Russia, Siberia, and Asian Russia. So the source of tin appear to have been exploited by the Eurasian steppe nomadic culture around 2000 BC, as well as by northern Chinese cultures around the same time, while rich veins of tin are known to exist in Central and South Africa. Whether these were exploited during ancient times is still debated. Evidence of direct tin trade between Europe and Eastern Mediterranean has been demonstrated through the analysis of tin ingots dated to the 13th and 12th century BC from sites in Israel, Turkey, and modern-day Greece. Tin ingots from Israel, for example, have been found to share chemical compositions with tin from Cornwall and Devon, which is Great Britain. By 2000 to 1500 BC, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan appear to have exploited their source of tin, carrying the resource eastward and westward along the Silk Road, crossing Central Asia. In China, early tin is extracted along the Yellow River in early Tao and the Shang Dynasty times between 2500 and 1800 BC. Trade and industry play a major role in the development of ancient Bronze Age civilization, with artifacts of the Indus Valley civilization being found in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. Early long-distance trade was limited almost exclusively to luxury goods like spices, textiles, and precious metals. Not only did this make cities with ample amounts of these products extremely rich, but also led to an intermingling of culture for the first time in history. Trade routes were also over water. The first and most extensive trade route were over rivers such as the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates, which led to growth of cities on the banks of these rivers. So I'm gonna pause here and see if anyone has any comment.
There is a question from Galaxy A01.
Okay.
Go ahead, Galaxy. Hello? I thought he was asking a question. I guess.
Mute, right?
Anyone
You
else?
can unmute. Yeah, maybe she wants to unmute, right?
Let me see if I can unmute her. I
No,
apologize.
everybody can unmute themselves if they want to.
Oh, hold on. Maybe she said she can unmute. Hold on a second. All right,
Is
unmute.
she away?
No, I just she just asked me he or she just asked me to unmute themselves.
Oh,
And then
okay.
you have let's
Well,
have Jason. Let's have Jason to ask a question. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to know, does the discovery of bronze is a universal thing or happen on a certain place and then spread out? Do you know?
Yes, so bronze is bronze is made by smelting copper and alloying with tin. So bronze has to be made by copper and tin together. And the earliest example was the Mesopotamia with the Sumerian. They were the first ones who created bronze and spread out to the other regions.
So you believe China learned from Mesopotamia, not just original invented by themselves?
I believe so, because the bronze in Mesopotamia, especially the Sumer, they were around 4,000 BC in the fourth millennium. And back then, China, 4,000 BC is there's no such sophistication. So I definitely believe that back then, China has learned the technique from the West. I know from
Yeah, be careful there. Apparently I'm just looking up here. I believe Indians in the Americas were working bronze.
yes.
And there's no
In
way
this
it's free there.
valley.
They had to discover it independently.
Some was, but you know,
Um,
first there was a copper age. They just used copper without.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so then later on, they discovered that the alloying, making an alloy with tin. So yeah, it's hard to really know exactly. Maybe some places discovered independently. Maybe they just heard about this. I don't think we have a definite answer here.
I'm so sorry, because I'm pretty sure that bronze is much more advanced in the West than in China, because of the fact that at that same period of time, you know, you have all these sophisticated empires, Assyrian, Egyptians, you know, the Messenian. These empires are so well developed, and compared to the same time in China, there was no such developed civilization. There were some dynasties, you know, back then, but not at the level of the sophistication. And also one very important element that we have to remember, the creation of bronze. The purpose of the bronze was first in the West was probably for religious reasons. The building of these religious ritual artifacts were probably first, definitely, you know, began in the West, because back then in China, the religion was not started yet. The concept of religion has not started yet. Not in 4,000 BC, that's for sure. The religion in China probably came in much later, around, I think after, I think Buddhism, maybe around, you know, maybe,
About 500 BC. 500 BC.
Yeah.
Yes, Buddhism is like 6th century BC.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were other, like if you talk about Hinduism is much earlier, like we're talking maybe
Yes.
2000 BC.
But you see, the Hindus have trade with the West. And if the West has a more sophisticated society, you know, system, then the technology might have migrated to the Indus.
Definitely Sumerian, you know, culture, Sumerian civilization was the first one, as far as we know right now.
Yeah. And actually, I'm going to talk about Sumerian right now, because we cannot talk about them, you know, when it comes to bronze. So I'm going to continue with my.
Well, Alex, before you continue, there's one question that was in the chat, and Sid is asking, what was the reason to switch to bronze from copper?
Oh, like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, that because bronze was harder and more durable than other metals at the time, and therefore gained a technology advantage. So, copper was, copper is very soft, so, and not durable. So bronze was much harder and durable when you're alloying with tin or other metals. Yeah.
Just say harder and stronger. It really covers it.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Alex, continue.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about the starting point of the Bronze Age, Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia's name comes from the ancient Greek word for the land between the rivers. And do I have a maps?
Well, actually, it was given by Greeks. That name was given by Greeks. So they initially, obviously wasn't
Right.
known by that. Yeah, that's correct. Sorry.
So I do have a map of the ancient Middle East and Mesopotamia. And this is the map that we're going to be referring to a lot. I think I sent it over in chat. If anyone,
do you see?
Yeah, we see it, right?
I think
Yeah,
it's
we-
on the screen. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sharing
we-
it from the chat.
Great. Sorry. Okay. All right. Let me continue. So the first region to enter the Bronze Age, which began with the rise of the Mesopotamian civilization of Sumer in the mid-4th millennium BC, often called one of the cradle of civilization. They practiced intense year-round agriculture, developed writing system, which is the cuneiform, invented the potter's wheel. Oh my God, sorry. Created central government using in form of hereditary monarchies, written law codes, city-state and nation states and empires, embarked on advanced archaeological projects, including social stratification, economic and civil administration, slavery, and practice of organized warfare, medicine and religion, and aid the foundation for astronomy, mathematics, and astrology. The Sumerian culture had inventions already greatly established standards for so many other cultures in the region. Around 2000 BC, because of the environmental and farming issues reduced their culture yield, it is estimated that the population in this area declined by nearly third-fifth. This greatly upset the balance of power within the region. Following invasion in 2028 to 2004 BC, the Sumer came under Amorites rule. The independent Amorit states of the 20th to 18th century are summarized in the Sumerian king list, ending with the rise of the Babylonian Empire under 1800 BC. So that was the Sumerian, and
Also a Akkadian Empire, right?
yes, and also the Akkadian Empire. Yes.
Correct. Amorites obviously was the predecessors of the Cyrus the Great and Medes and stuff like that. So just to give people a synopsis. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the late Bronze period collapse. This is just a general picture, and then we're going to go into more detail. Okay, so simply put, was a dark age for the entire Near East, North Africa, Asia Minor, Caucasus, Mediterranean, and Balkan regions, with great upheavals and mass movement of people, when many states and empires vanished and never recovered. A pause of advancement in surviving civilizations, as well as the disappearance of religion and inventions. Many factors attributed to the collapse, and we will talk about them later. It was a time of societal collapse preceding the Greek Dark Ages. The collapse affected a large area covering much of Southeast Europe, West Asia, and North Africa, comprising the overlapping regions of Near East, the Eastern Mediterranean, the North Africa with Balkans, and the Asian, Anatolia, and Caucasus. It was a transition which historians believe was violent, sudden, and culturally disruptive for some civilization during the 12th century BC, along with a sharp economic decline of regional powers. The palace economy of Messenian Greece, the Asian region, and Anatolia that characterized the late Bronze Age disintegration, transforming into small isolated villages, culture of the Greek Dark Ages. The half century between 1200 and 1115 BC saw the cultural collapse of the Messenian kingdom, of the Kaddish in Babylonian, of the Tahiti Empire and Anatolia and the Levant, the new kingdom of Egypt, and the destruction of Ugarit and the Amorid states in the Levant, the fragmentation of the Luwian state of Western Anatolia, and a period of chaos in Canaan. So that was a lot, okay? The deterioration of this government interrupted trade routes and severely reduced literacy in much of this area. Almost every city between Philos and Gaza was violently destroyed and many abandoned, including Hattusa, Messini, and Ugarit. Within a period of 40 to 50 years at the end of the 13th and the beginning of 12th century, almost every single significant city in the Eastern Mediterranean world was destroyed. Many of them never to be occupied again. Later, scholars describe the collapse as the worst disaster in ancient history, even more calamitous than the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Cultural memories of the disaster told of the lost golden age. Memories of the Bronze Age collapse influenced Plato's story of Atlantis. And Hesiod spoke of ages of gold, silver, and bronze separated from the cruel modern age of iron. So we now I'd like to talk about there are two important battles preceding the collapse, because these two battles are going to be referenced a lot later. Now,
Alex, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I mean, this is a tricky question. Do you think that, no, I mean, I don't mean to trick you. Do you think that sack of Troy is the part of the Bronze Age collapse?
Yes, and we're actually going to talk, I'm actually going to talk about Troy later.
Okay.
Yeah, but they were unfortunately part of, but they were revived later by the Greeks. So yeah. So any other comments before we go into the battles?
I just wanted to point out Luvian was an Anatolia area where you can see on the top area that they lived right next to Hittites. And actually, yeah, so you know, their predecessors, and I mean, they're not related to Lydians, who were considered to be a different tribe, but they lived next to Hittites. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes. Okay, so I'm gonna go in to talk about the battles. So one of the most significant battle before the collapse was Battle of Kaddish. The Battle of Kaddish took place between the forces of New Kingdom of Egypt under Ramesses II and the Hittite Empire under Muwatalli II at the city of Kaddish on the Orontes River near the modern Lebanon-Syria border. The battle is generally dated to 1274 BC from the Egyptian chronology and is the earliest pitched battle in recorded history for which details of tactics and formations are known. It is believed to have been the largest chariot battle ever fought, involving between 5,000 and 6,000 chariots in total. As a result of discovery of multiple Kaddish inscriptions, the Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty is the best documented battle in all of ancient history. An official peace treaty with the Hasuli III, the new king of Hittites, some 15 years later, after the Battle of Kaddish and the 21st year of Ramesses II's reign, around 1250 BC, finally concluded running borderlands conflicts. The treaty was inscribed on a silver tablet, which of clay copies survive in the Hittite capital of Hattusa, now in Turkey, as the earliest international peace treaty known to historians. The importance of this long battle lasted 15 years, have made these two empires weak because of depletion of supplies and resources was at a huge cost. And shortly after they recover, they will be facing the Sea People's aggressive attacks.
Now,
there-
Sea People, do we know who were the Sea People or any kind of notification? Because it's kind of like vague, right? I mean, they're thinking it's Etruscans could be Sea People. It could be,
Yes.
you know, I don't know, it could be anybody, Palestinians or the early, you know, Jewish tribes. I mean, it's just, you know, it was kind of weird.
Yes, yes, the Sea People was very little documented, but it's actually what I'm going to talk about in my next topic, which is the Sea People, the battles with the Sea People around 1200 to 900 BC. So the Sea People, the evidence I've gathered from the website is not clear exactly who these people are. So the Sea People are a purported seafaring confederation that attacked ancient Egypt and other regions of the East Mediterranean prior to and during the Late Bronze collapse. They sailed around the Eastern Mediterranean, invaded Anatolia, Syria, Phoenicia, Canaan, Cyprus, and Egypt toward the end of the Bronze Age. Existing theories variously propose equating them with several Asian tribes, raiders from Central Europe, scattered soldiers who turned to piracy or became refugees, and links with natural disasters such as earthquake or climatic shifts such as drought that have grouped these people together to find resources. Ramesses III, which is the Egyptian king of the 20th dynasty, who reigned for almost the first half of 12th century BC, was forced to deal with a later wave of invasions of the Sea People. And the best recording of these events in his 8 years, the fact that several civilizations collapsed around 1175 BC has led to the suggestion that the Sea People may have been involved at the end of the Hidi, Messinian, the Mitanni kingdoms. So they are very powerful group of people that a lot of these empires feared. And these great empires be invaded by these Sea People from nowhere and destroying their cities is really a very surprising phenomenon, because these great empires have a long history of war, and falling into the Sea People's invasions is really hard to comprehend. So Egyptian king Ramesses comments about the scale of the Sea People's onslaught in the Eastern Mediterranean are confirmed by the destruction of the states of Tahiti, Ugarit, Ashkelon, and Hazar around this time. Amurapi was the last Bronze Age ruler of the ancient Syrian city of Ugarit. He wrote and preserved vivid letter in response to a plea of assistance from the king Al-Ashia, which is the state of Cyprus, was a state which exists in the Middle and Late Bronze Age and was situated somewhere in the Eastern Mediterranean. It was a major source of goods, especially copper, for ancient Egypt and other states in the ancient Near East. So the king of Ugarit wrote, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came, my cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. Does not my father know that all my troops and chariots are in the land of Hatti, and all my ships are in the land of Lucca? Thus the country is abandoned to itself. May my father know it. The 7 ships of the enemy that came here inflicted much damage upon us." So Amurapi also wrote to Ashiwara, the grand supervisor of Alasia. Evidently, Amurapi had informed Ashiwara that an enemy fleet of 20 ships had been spotted at sea. Ashiwara wrote back and inquired about the location of Amurapi's own forces and where the enemy fleet of 20 ships are now located. Unfortunately for both Ugarit and Alasia, neither kingdom was able to fend off the Sea People's onslaught, and both were ultimately destroyed. So we're gonna, so from the point of view of Egypt, the Ramesses III, the second king of Egypt in the 20th dynasty, who reigned for most of the first half of 12th century, was forced to deal with later waves of invasion of Sea People. The best recorded of these in his 8th year. This was recorded in 2 long inscriptions from his temple. The inscription recorded 3 victorious campaigns against the Sea People in year 5, 8, and 12. The invasion of year 5, only the Peliset and Jakar were mentioned. The attack was 2-pronged, one by sea and one by land. As is, the Sea People divided their forces. So King Ramesses was waiting in the Nile mouth and trapped the enemy fleet there. The land forces were defeated separately. In year 8, they are revealed unquestionably as Sea People. Again, the Peliset, the Jakar, the Shikalesh, Danyan, and Washish, which are classified as foreign countries in the inscription. They camped in Amor and sent the fleet to the Nile. The pharaoh was once more waiting for them. He had built a fleet especially for the occasion, hid it in the Nile's mouth, and posted coast watchers. The enemy fleet was ambushed there. The ships overturned, and the men dragged up on shore and executed ad hoc. The land army was also rooted within Egyptian-controlled territory. This land battle occurred against the northern countries. When it was over, several chiefs were captive. Of Hatti, Amor, and Sasu among the land people, and the Jakar, Sheridan of the sea, Teresh of the sea, and Pelest or Philistine. So I guess it looks like from the first battle and the second battle, there are different groups of people involved. And now we're gonna go to the year 12, which is the last battle with the Sea People, with the Egyptians. It was recorded on the papyrus Harris I, the longest known papyrus from Egypt of the period, suggests a wider campaign against the Sea People, but does not mention the date. In it, Ramesses III says, "I slew the Danyan in their isles and burned the Jakar and Peliset," implying a maritime raid of his own. He also captured some Sheridan and Washish of the sea and settled them in Egypt. Another ancient, yes?
Alex, can we take some questions? Maybe there's some people that
sorry.
So in summary, can you summarize the where the Sea People came from, just in general, like in your own words, so this way people can follow? I mean, what I've gotten is that Ramses II has been speaking about this versus this Sea People by the name Shikalesh and whatever they are, and then at the current rate right now, people are trying to connect who they were. But in summary, can you just summarize it in like few words what had actually happened from Sea People attacking Egypt and then Egypt then retaliating and destroying them. And also, I have one question: is if that was what happened, how come it is called Bronze Age collapse, and there is no evidence of any cities, the major cities, actually prospering after that, and there was a dark age, so to speak? Sorry.
I'm going to comment on your last question first. Yes,
Okay.
a lot of sites were abandoned and collapsed, but there were a few states and cities and empire that have survived, but generally weakened. Okay, and then regarding the sea people, like I said in the very beginning, it was not very well documented. They could have come from anywhere. Like I mentioned, these like people like Jakar, the Pelast, Sheridan was, these ancient names, but they don't really say where they come from. The theory is that the sea people came from, the common thing of these theory will propose a migratory and invasion group of people from various areas of the Mediterranean. They grouped together to attack, rob, and destroy. Destruction site of about 45 major settlements. And the sea people might have occurred because of climate changes. We know that there could be a drought or earthquake, and the depletion of food, resources of food and supplies made them go around the Levant, Greece, and Anatolia to rob and for their own advantage. So this is a group of people, and I really wish that there were more evidence of these people, but apparently the one documented in Egypt was the best documents, because they will appear from out of nowhere, and you don't even know who you're fighting against with. These are really many groups of people that group together to destroy. I think mainly what they wanted was the resources to keep them survive. And also, like I mentioned before, the war of the Kaddish lasted 15 years, might have displaced a huge amount of people, a lot of migrations and escape from the war, and so they might have grouped together to attack the rich cities and rob them for their own good. Now, I think when they robbed these cities, not only they robbed their food, equipment, they probably also might have robbed their war, like weapons, because how is it possible that these sea people have 20 fleets, as mentioned in the letter, it requires huge amount of resource and to build it. So I actually think that they might have also robbed the ships from the other civilizations and empires and cities and just took over. So they were able to become very strong very quickly by looting, robbing, and taking over of these resources to make them strong. So does this answer your question?
Yeah,
Sorry, can I interrupt and ask a question, please?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, this occurred at the same time as the biblical tale of the Joshua and the conquest. So is it possible that the Bible got it from this? Or how does Joshua, real or not real, fit into all this? Because it happened at about the same time, I believe.
I'm so sorry. Are you talking about?
Who are you talking about? Joshua?
Joshua.
You
You
mean
talking about the
Israelites,
biblical Joshua?
yeah, the biblical story.
Joshua is not a historical figure.
No, I realize that. That's what I'm trying to say. Does this refute Joshua as being a historical figure? And did the people who wrote the Bible use these historical stories to create the conquest by Joshua, because they happened at the same time. So someone got the stories from somewhere. I realized that Joshua undoubtedly is not a historical figure, although I don't know if that's entirely.
You know, Joshua, if you're talking about the Jewish, they invaded from the east into the west. The sea people, they came from the sea, from the west into the east. So it has no connection.
Yeah,
and we cannot, and we don't even know if the Jews even existed as a nation at the time of supposedly Joshua, because historically and archaeologically, you know, there is no confirmation of that.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid you didn't understand me. I don't say this confirmation. I personally don't believe it. I'm just saying that the Bible must have got the story from somewhere. I believe it's about the same time. I believe the conquest was either in the 13th or 12th century, but some of the places are the same, whether they came from the west or the east. I think you misinterpreted me. I'm not saying that.
The sea people were mentioned in other places, such as the Bible or in the Hebrew religion. They might be associated with Hebrews back then, but all these piece of little information, piece information from here or there, still doesn't really make a whole picture of exactly who these people are, what do they want, what caused these people. So yes, there are records of these people, you know, but they were the problem is that there was just not a lot of them, because if you imagine when you're on the land, all of a sudden you see all these sea people coming. They're coming to attack, to kill and loot and destroy. The first thing you're gonna do is not gonna sit down or write down or the first thing you're gonna do is probably pack up your bag and run, you know. So all these sudden attacks, I think, left. And later on, there was actually an example of that. People just ran, they just escaped. There was no time to record these people, and the truth of the matter is, even people back then didn't really know, how these people came about. Like I mentioned, the best recorded in my view was the Egyptian records. So Jason.
Yeah, my first time I heard about sea people caused the destruction of the ancient civilization. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I think I'm very surprised hear this. And then I kind of think about the situation like Viking, right? When like similar to us. So if at that time, I don't know what's the technology over there, but if they have something called sea people, they must own high technology, because at that time, if you can manage travel on the ocean, they must own high technology. And secondly, they must be very adventurous people. So it's no surprise they cause destruction. And this kind of sea people will be different than the agriculture-based people, which are well organized, right? So they only bring the destruction and they don't organize. So I believe the situation I can imagine would be similar to Viking. They probably destroy the civilization and then they don't build anything, but some of them may settle down over there and become, leave some gin or some over there, some trade.
Yeah. So that's why I mentioned before that I think
we need to take a Howard question if it's possible.
Okay.
Hello?
Howard.
I was just going to ask, do we have any idea how large the upper class in the cities were? In a really stratified political system, you're going to have a very small upper class, which has access to bronze weapons and stuff like that. And so you can have remarkably few warriors. You're talking about 20 ships. If that's 100 guys per ship, it's a pretty glorious use of the word ship. That's 2,000 warriors going ashore. And if a city of, say, 50,000 people maybe have hundreds of warriors, if that. So overthrowing and burning cities, No, I know that lots of historic, like basically the economy collapsed in the late in the second millennium, and and the Egyptians described them as sea people. So it's and nobody else described. And you mentioned them doing that. So do we have any idea how, like, what the upper class populations in those cities were? That tells you how many soldiers there were.
Yeah, I think in the ancient times back then, when facing with such great destructive power like the sea people, I think a lot of them either escaped and did not really want to stay to fight with these people. And I think Jason's comment before was I think it's true that the sea people had advanced technology, advanced weapons, probably because by looting and robbing from other states. I don't think they have the time to make that. I think they just took them, and then make themselves very powerful. But I actually also believe that they're quite organized, because without organization and tactics, it's not possible to be able to knock down so many, city states. Yeah.
Well, Lisa
But
has a question.
I don't know. But I really don't know how many people were soldiers and upper class. Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it pays to not
Lisa has a
overestimate the
question.
combat skills
Alex,
of
is it
pirates.
okay? She can ask, and then we'll go ahead.
So I think it's also putting things into context. And I think, Alex, you may be getting to this because you touched on it. But what's the motivating factor for the existence of a sea peoples? What else is going on at the time that could drive either people coming together or individually, and going off and pillaging, stealing resources, etc. So there's a lot of scholarship, and not a lot, but some scholarship that's evolving, that's talking a lot more, putting more emphasis on the refugee factor, of which we have some evidence with reliefs at Medinet Habu on Ramses III's reliefs that you mentioned, Alex. So I think that before we make a judgment call on sea peoples, that we really have to understand the context and the motivation for their existence overall. And I think, Alex, you may be touching on that or getting to that.
I think the motivation is simple. They want to, destroy, rob, and burn down the states to make themselves stronger, and maybe ultimately make a state of their own. As to what encouraged them, there was a theory that there was a period of drought that depleted the agricultural resources. So these people probably team up together to say, you know what, why don't we just go to the other rich countries and rob their, resources for ourselves? And these people are much more aggressive than the others, probably because, these people probably don't have a religion, the sea people. So for them, a group of people, because the time back then, religion was central to their lives. But the sea people, I think, do not have a religion, and therefore they don't care. They just go on with the onslaught and destroy all these places, and finally destroyed by the Egyptians at a great cost. It wasn't easy for the Egyptians to defeat them. So the lack of information about these people is really cannot complete the whole picture of the sea people, except the fact that they made great destructions in that region around that time, which might have caused the collapse of the Bronze period. So, Howard?
Another question. Do we know the cities were attacked and burned down? Do we know that the local crops and stuff were destroyed? Don't forget, most ancient Mesopotamia was a hydraulic empire. To destroy the cities, the irrigation collapses and everybody dies. If you attack cities in Anatolia, the city may be an active nuisance. In other words, if barbarians sack the city, all of a sudden the guys that collect taxes from you are gone.
Right. So
Along possibly with the local warlords who rape and pillage your country.
right. So there was scientific indication that at the same time back then, there was a severe drought. And I'm actually going to talk about it later as one of the causes of the collapse. So if you could wait until then, yeah. But the drought could have forced these people to come out because of lack of resources and just start robbing. Because imagine yourself in that situation, you know, with the lack of food. You know, what are you going to do? You have to get it from somewhere else, right? So people with similar ideas might have grouped together. And at that point, they probably already lost their religion, don't trust the gods. They only just want to group together and you know, cooperate with each other to get as much resource from these areas as possible. And not really to occupy, not to occupy these sites. No, they were robbed, destroyed, then left. So that was what they were doing until the Egyptians defeated them. Yeah. So we'll talk more about the environmental costs later. So I'm gonna go on to, okay. So there were many hypotheses to where the sea people came from. The common thing of these theories all produce a migratory invasion group of people from various areas of the Mediterranean, grouped together to attack, rob, and destroy. The destruction site were about 45 major settlements, which is termed major sites destroyed in a catastrophe. They're concentrated in the Levant, Greece, and Anatolia. So now we're going to go into the major empires during the collapse: the Messenian Greece, the Tahiti Empire, Babylonian, Assyrian, Kingdom of Egypt. I'm not really going into detail about Kingdom of Egypt because the history is so long, and you know, but I'm just going to concentrate on the end of the period at the end of the Bronze Age collapse. And there were, so the two only empires that survived the collapse were the Assyrian Empire. And if we look at the map here, oh, okay, the map is gone. The map here, so the Assyrians is in northern Mesopotamia, and Egyptians, of course, is in Egypt, Africa. And let me just continue. So the Assyrian Empire was a Mesopotamian kingdom and empire of the ancient Near East. That existed as a state from perhaps as early as 26 BC, from the city of Assur until its collapse between 620 BC and 605 BC. A Semitic-speaking Rome, Assyria was centered on Tigris River in Upper Mesopotamia, a region in modern terms northern Iraq, northeast Syria, and southeast Turkey. The name Assyria originates with the Syrian state's original capital, the ancient city of Assur, which dates to 2600 BC. Originally one of a number of Akkadian-speaking city-states in Mesopotamia, Assyrian became subject of Sargon of Akkad, who united all the Akkadian, the Sumerian-speaking people of Mesopotamia under Akkadian Empire, which lasted from 2334 to 2154 BC. The Assyrians created a powerful empire of their own in several periods, making up a substantial part of the greater Mesopotamian cradle of civilization, which included Sumer, the Akkadian Empire, and Babylonia. Assyria reached a height of technology, a technological, scientific, and cultural achievement for its time from 1365 to 1056 BC. Later years, Assyria overthrew the empire of Huri Mitanni and annexed much of the Hittite Empire eclipsed the Egyptian Empire, conquered Babylonia, Elam, Canaan, and Phrygia in the Near East. So they are really powerful back then. During the Bronze Age collapse, Assyria's empire were not unduly affected by these tumultuous events for some 150 years. Perhaps the only ancient power that was not, and in fact thrived for most of the period. However, upon the death of their king, Ashur-di-Kala in 1056 BC, Assyria went to a comparative decline for the next 100 years or so. The empire shrank significantly, and by 1012 BC, Assyria only have control the areas close to Assyria itself, essential to keeping trade routes open. Is there any comments on Assyria? If not, I'm going to go to Babylon Empire. Okay, so the Babylon Empire. Babylon was initially a minor city-state and controlled little surrounding territory until King Hammurabi around 1792 to 1750 BC, who conquered all of the cities and city-states of southern Mesopotamia, coalescing them into the one kingdom ruled from Babylon. After the reign of Hammurabi, and the whole southern Mesopotamia came to be known as Babylonia. Hammurabi's empire destabilized after his death, and the Assyrians defeated and drove out the Babylonians and the Amorites. The Amoritid dynasty remained in power in Babylon, which again became a small city-state after the Assyrian attack. In 1595 BC, the city was overthrown by the Tahiti Empire. Thereafter, Casides, northeastern Semitic-speaking of ancient Iran, captured Babylon, ushering in a dynasty that lasted 435 years. By 1155 BC, after continued attacks and annexing of territory by the Assyrians and the Elamites, the Casides were deposed in Babylon. They did not survive the collapse, but were later revived and continued their glorious empire until the Persian invasion in 539 BC. So I want to mention Babylon because it was a very important empire during that time. Even though their fall, their collapse was not directly related to the Bronze Age collapse, and but they were weakened because of the surrounding regions and the war with the Assyrians. Yeah. Any comment on this section? Okay, then I'm gonna go to next section, which is, so finally we'll come to the Greek Dark Ages. From 1100 to 715 BC, the Greek Dark Ages is the period of Greek history from the end of the Messenian palatial civilization around 1100 BC to the beginning of the Archaic age around 750 BC. The archaeological evidence shows a widespread collapse of Bronze Age civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean world at the outset of the period, as the great palaces and cities of Messenia were destroyed or abandoned. Following the collapse, fewer and smaller settlements suggest famine and depopulation. In Greece, the Linear B writing of the Greek language used by Messenian bureaucrats ceased, and Greek alphabet were not developed until the beginning of the Archaic period. The decoration on Greek pottery after 1100 BC lacks the figurative decoration of Messenian wares and is restricted to simpler general geometric styles. So I guess they went from a much variety in decorations to just simple geometric style like circles, lines. The fragmented, localized, and autonomous culture lacked cultural and aesthetic cohesion, and noted for many different of material cultures and pottery styles. Like in Athens, it seems to be more conservative, and in Knossos, it was more eclectic. So kind of in this period, dark period, you know, these cities developed their own different pottery styles. That was not.
Can I just add something? Sorry.
Yeah.
So this interesting that there was a, you know, obviously archaeological, you know, Minoan culture that was in the island of Crete, and the Knossos was the is a compound that where the kings and queens lived. And so I think it was 125 chambers. Don't quote me on it. So that's what it was found by. Originally, it was discovered by Schliemann, and then this guy Evans bought it from Schliemann and discovered Knossos. And we know Schliemann from discovering Troy, or presumably discovering Troy, you know, in Bok Choy in current day Turkey. So what's interesting is they said that Minoan culture first they thought was destroyed by the you know, earthquake, and by this that earthquake was actually probably was that big that was actually heard in Indonesia. It was that big. It was tremendous. But then they found out that actually people escaped the earthquake prior. They didn't find any human remains or any kind of traces of anything that would suggest that people dying, you know, during the earthquake. So they already have left, or there was no invasion by Mycenaeans whatsoever, and therefore it was just a cultural overtake, so to speak. And it was an basic depopulation. Maybe it was a drought, and then people just left on their own. Just, yeah, as a suggestion. And also, I don't know if you're going to be talking about the you know, the what is it called, Hittites. The same thing happened with Hittites. They actually didn't find any destruction of their capital Hattusili in Anatolia. In fact, they have found evidence of people leaving and burning their libraries and burning their palaces, but there was no human, again, no true traces of any DNA or human remains, any of that stuff. Just wanted to add something like that, just to throw a kink into it.
Yes, I did not cover the Minoans. I only covered the Messenians, but I know that the Messenians were much influenced by the Minoan state. And I think the Minoans also collapsed during the Dark Ages. And the Hittites, yes, you're right. It looks like there was a gradual migration outside of Hittites, and they just kind of abandoned their city altogether, which is really hard to think of, because you know you think of the Messenian, you know, Messini was destroyed, okay, that's for sure, but the Hittites, you know, why did they just leave, right? They just left, you know. And then they were such a great, powerful empire, you know. So I think resources, to find new resources, and there was evidence of an earthquake that actually was evidence in Messenia, which destroyed some of the palaces of Messini. But Messini and Minoan is different from the Hittites, you know, the way they collapse. So all these areas collapse differently. Some of them were burned and destroyed maybe by the sea people or war, and some of them were just kind of gradually depopulated and migrate outside of their original city-state, possibly because of the lack of resource. You know, the drought caused the decline in agriculture to find some other resources. So yeah, which I would cover Messenia and the Hittites later, actually.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry.
Sure. So now, so the fragmented, localized, and autonomous culture lack culture and aesthetic cohesion, with many different material cultures used and styles in Greece, and especially the burial practices and settlement structures are also, you know, changed. They all have their own way of living through the Dark Ages. So now let's look at Messenian. Messini developed into a major power during 1550 and 4050 BC and believed to have become the main center of Asian civilization through the 15th century, to the extent that the 200 years from 1400 BC to 1200 BC are known as the Messenian Age. In the second millennium, Messenia was one of the major centers of Greek civilization, a military stronghold which dominated much of southern Greece, Crete, Cyclades, and parts of southwest Anatolia. The period of Greek history from about 1600 BC to about 1100 BC is called the Messenian Age, in reference to Messini. At its peak in 1350 BC, the Sedato and Lower Town had a population of 30,000, an area of 32 hectares, situated in northeastern Peloponnesus, Greece. An Acropolis site was built on a hill 900 feet above sea level, some 12 miles inland from the Gulf of Argolis, situated in the northeast corner of Ijaf Plain. It easily overlooked the whole area and was ideal position to be a center of power, especially as it commanded all easy routes to the Isthmus of Corinth. Besides a strong defensive and strategic position, it had good farmland and an adequate water supply. It was the last phase of the Bronze Age in ancient Greece, spanning the period from approximately 1750 to 1050 BC. It represented the first advanced and distinctly Greek civilization in mainland Greece, with its palatial states, urban organizations, works of art, and writing system. The Messenians were ethnic or indigenous group people who were likely stimulated by their contact with the Minoan Crete and other Mediterranean cultures to develop a more sophisticated socio-political culture of their own. The Messenian Greece introduced several innovations in the field of engineering, architecture, and military infrastructure, while trade over vast areas of the Mediterranean was essential for the Messenian economy. The syllabic script, the Linear B, offers the first written record of the Indo-European Greek language, and their religion already included several deities that can also be found in the Olympic pantheon. Messenian Greece was dominated by warrior elite society and consisted of a network of palace-centered states that developed rigid hierarchical, political, social, and economic systems. At the head of his society was the king known as the Wanax. The most important site was Messini. Other states that emerged, including Philos, Medea, and the Peloponnesus, Thebes, Athens in central Greece, and Iolcos in Thessaly. Messenian influenced settlements also appear in Macedonia, on islands, on the Aegean Sea, on the southwest coast of Asia Minor, the Levant, Cyprus, and Italy. So the fall of the Messeni. So I think Messenian Empire stretched far and great, even outside of Greece. And I believe, even though they were, they ceased to exist in the end, but I think their culture and religion have lived on through the other city-states outside of Greece. So now let's talk about the fall of Messini. The city of Messini was initially destroyed in an earthquake in 1250 BC, as evidenced by the presence of crushed bodies buried in collapsed buildings. However, the site was rebuilt only to face destruction again in 1190 BC as a result of a series of major fires. There could have been the result of an attack on the site and its palaces. However, lack of archaeological evidence of an attack. Thus, while fire was definitely the cause of the destruction, it is unclear what or who caused it. The Messenian civilization started to collapse from 1200 BC Archaeologists suggest that around 1100 BC, the palace centers and outlying settlements of Messenians' highly organized culture began to be abandoned or destroyed. And by 1050 BC, the recognizable features of Messenian culture had disappeared and the population had ceased significantly. So the reason for their final decline is a mystery of how a mighty empire, highly organized, could fall so quickly. So there was an initial decline and revival in 1250 after the destruction of the earthquake, apparently occurred in various centers of mainland Greece for reasons that cannot be identified by archaeologists. Thebes was burned to the ground. Around that year or slightly later, near Orchomenos shared the same fate, while the fortification of Glad were deserted. In Peloponnesus, a number of buildings surrounding the citadel of Messini were attacked and burned. These incidents appear to have promoted the massive strengthening and expansion of the fortification in various sites. In some cases, arrangements were also made for the creation of subterranean passages, which led to underground cisterns. Turin's, Medea, and Athens expanded their defense with new Cyclopean-style walls. The extension program at Messini almost doubled the fortified area of the citadel. To this phase of the extension belonged to the impressive Lion Gate, the main entrance into the Messenian Acropolis. It appears that after this first wave of destruction, a short-lived revival of Messenian culture followed. But, however, at the final collapse, none of the defense measures appear to have prevented the final destruction and collapse of the Messenian states. A second destruction struck Messini in 1190 BC or shortly after. This event marked the end of Messini as a major power. The site was then reoccupied, but on a smaller scale. As a result of this turmoil, specific regions in mainland Greece witnessed a dramatic population decrease. Messini refugees migrated to Cyprus and Levantine coast. Nevertheless, other regions on the edge of the Messenian world prospered, such as the Ionian Islands, the northeastern Peloponnese, parts of Attica, and a number of Asian islands. The Acropolis of Athens, oddly, appeared to have avoided the destruction. So I'll talk a little bit about the legacy of the Messeni, because they're such an interesting culture, right? And you know, as a great culture empire, and to fall in such a way, you know, it's just unimaginable. And still remains a mystery. In the 8th century BC, after the end of so-called Dark Ages, Greece emerged with a network of myths and legends, the greatest of all being that of the Trojan epic cycle. In general, the Greek classical antiquity idealized the Messenian period as a glorious period of heroes closest to the gods and material wealth. And I'm going to skip some parts. They made several architectural inventions. They're responsible for transmitting a wide range of arts and crafts, especially of Minoan origin. The Messenians.
Just to add to it, I'll just to put people in perspective. Mycenae is what Homer refers to when he was talking about Greeks attacking the Troy. Menelaus is a Mycenaean related, so to speak. There was no, so to speak, notion of Dorian Greeks at the time, and the Dorian Greeks didn't even make it to this land, so we don't really know a lot about it. But
Right.
so when we talk about Achilles, Menelaus, and Helen the Troy,
Yeah.
it all has to do with Mycenaeans, not Dorian Greeks or
Yeah.
classical Athens.
But I believe that during the Messenian civilization, right, those they actually worship those gods. They actually was part of the Messenian religion, but after the collapse and when the Greeks came in and took over the Messenian culture, they only survive as myths and stories and not really as a religion. So I think yeah, that was a difference, you know, between Messenian and later on Greece, which, you know, I'm gladly that, you know, these you know, stories survived, because, you know, it would be so sad to see Messenian civilization, a great civilization, just disappear and no continuity. So the continuity, even though it's not in the same form, but at least it continued and it enriched the cultures back then, especially the Greeks. Yeah.
But it's interesting though, they said that like Minoan, due to the frescoes and different paintings that were discovered or archaeological in Xenosis Palace, they actually saw that Minoan people had not looked like Greeks whatsoever. They actually looked like Middle Eastern.
Oh, really?
So they had dark hair, curly dark hair, and they were a little bit dark complexion. So they didn't. So they were not. They, you know. And what's interesting is a lot of the Minoan artifacts were found in area of, you know, Palestine and, you know, Israel, and therefore they're connecting Philistines to Minoan culture. That was an interesting connection. Yeah.
Yes.
And so Howard has a question. Howard, sorry. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, you keep referring to people either having religion or not having religion. Are you making a really? I would assume everybody has some sort of belief in beings. Are you making a precise distinction there?
I actually lately met a scholar on ancient religion, and in ancient times, according to her, you know, people were not. They don't think themselves as individualistics, okay? Not like right now. We all think, oh, everyone is special. Back then, people, you know, were more connected to the universe, you know, and their gods. You know, they didn't put as much emphasis on themselves. You know, they are more concerned about, you know, how to farm, you know, how to use the seasons, and, you know, to survive, you know, as well as their religion. So I think, you know, people back then is very different from now, and these people would not have their civilization without religion. I think their civilization and religion is kind of like, you know, combined together. Their religion is their culture, you know. I wouldn't say for all the empires back then, you know, but definitely the Messenian, the Egyptians, right? The Hittite, the Syrians, you know, I think the Babylonians, right? They all have their own version of but there was a central theme that, you know, sun was you know, they all worship of the sun. So that was kind of common. And all these, you know, really came from the Sumerians. Sumerians first created all the stories of the myth and all that, and the god and the goddess, and then you know, I think it, you know, of course, it was such an attractive religion, right? With the gods and the stories, and it got really popular, I believe, back then, and spread out to the Messenians, you know, or the other parts. And yeah, I think
Alex, can I
yeah.
ask you, don't you think that every tribe, even before any kind of civilization, would have some set of gods? That's how they explain unexplainable. I mean, I don't know what you call religion. If you have gods, you have religion, right? If you believe in some supernatural. So it seems that there was a religion. And yeah, I understand the ideas have the Mesopotamian ideas about religion did affect many cultures, but they also blend with aboriginal religion that existed before, and then they interchanged the ideas. So yeah, we see the connections, but it's not exactly the same. There are still differences. But
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's possible for any group of people living any village not having some kind of religion. You know, they always had, everybody had different
Yes.
religions. They all explained, you know, so I don't think, I don't know, you meant some kind of specific religions when you said no religion. I don't quite understand.
I say no religion. I was probably referring to the sea people.
But why no religion? How do
Because sea
how could
people
they
were
not?
a group of people that came together, and they might all have to come from different religions. And because of drought and a lot of war happened back then,
Right.
you know, what do they think about their
Oh, you
religion?
mean they didn't have a common religion, but
Yeah.
maybe groups of those sea people had their own
Yeah,
religion,
and
but
they're
they
gonna
didn't
have
have a common. Okay.
right, and I believe that they put all their religions aside and just decided that the best way for them to survive, you know, was to
Okay.
attack. But like the ancient religion of the Sumer, the Messenians, Egyptians, you know, these are large, you know, like religions that
Right,
is
right.
heavily centered, was the center of their culture. You know, their palaces was responsible for organizing all the grains and managing all the stuff. So, you know, it was very much more close. Of course, the smaller states, I'm sure they all have some, you know, they all worship, you know, some gods, you know, but I guess, you know, I want to focus on the major empires here, the Messenian, the Egyptian, Assyrian, you know, as an example, because, you know, there's more evidence about them, and also, you know, they were all destroyed, which is, you know, still a mystery. And I'm that's all my own interpretation of what is religion play, because when you see the sea people coming, when you see your palace get burned down, you know, what do you think about what you believe? You believe that the gods might come and save you, you know, or you just pack your bag and just, you know, leave the palaces, leave the temples, because there must be some degrees of loss of faith, you know, in their religion for them to just, you know, get up and go. And maybe they have carried their religion to other places, and, you know, but these major religions, of course, disappear, such as the Messenian, even though the Greeks have inherited, and the Egyptians also ceased to exist, the religion, you know. So the Bronze Age collapse is not just, you know, politically and the states. I think it's also, you know, what people think, you know, the relationship with their gods, you know, and all the migrations out of these, you know, destructive areas, you know. Religion didn't really come back to the area, I think, you know, after the Greek Dark Ages. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna continue. Oh my God, we're running out of time. Okay, and I'm gonna skip Philos because it was okay. So I'm going to talk about Greece in general. None of the Messenian palaces of the late Bronze Age survived, with the possible exception of Cyclopean fortification on the Acropolis of Athens, with destruction being heaviest at the palaces in fortified states. Thebes was one of the early examples of this, having its palace sacked repeatedly between 1300 and 1200 BC, and eventually being completely destroyed by fire. So for Athens, while there's no evidence of any significant destruction at this site, the change in location of living quarters and burial sites demonstrate a significant recession clearly. So there was a huge, migration out of Athens that was not a violent affair, but due to other causes, such as environmental changes, the depletion of resources of food. They have to move out of Athens. There was a demand, note the presence of enclosed and protected means of access to water resources at Athens as evidence of persistent drought in the region that could have resulted in a fragile reliance on imports. So I think during that time, one of the other major reason of the collapse was the trade network. The trade network was basically totally destroyed. And so these empires and city-states that rely on imports of supplies, is much reduced. So they have to immigrate to other parts in order to sustain their lives. So Philos had an inscription that say that Philos expecting a seaborne attack with tablets at Philos discussing watchers guarding the coast. Regardless of what the threat from the sea was, it was likely to play a role in the decline, at least in hindering trade and perhaps vital food imports. So now from the evidence, it shows that in Greece in total, there were 11 sites that were evidence of collapse, 11 sites. So that was huge. Now, I want to talk about Troy right now. So Troy was an ancient city located in present-day Turkey. In ancient Greek literature, Troy is portrayed as a powerful kingdom of heroic age. A mystic era when monsters roamed the earth and gods interacted directly with humans. The archaeological site of Troy consists of hills of Hisarlik and the fields below it to the south. The hill is composed of strata containing the remains left behind by more than 3 millennia of human occupation. But the late 1300 BC, the Wilusa, which is the name of the Troy city, had become politically aligned with the Hittites. Wilusa soldiers may have served in the Hidi army during the Battle of Kaddish. A bit later, Wilusa seems to have experienced the political turmoil with the Hittites. This period of history serves as a backdrop of the story of Troy, even though there is no enough evidence to find the story as a real history of Troy. So, archaeological site of Troy consists of 9 major layers. The earliest dating from the early Bronze Age, the latest from the Byzantine era. The mystic city is typically identified with one of the late Bronze layers. The city was destroyed around 1180 BC, roughly temporarily with the late Bronze collapse, but subsequent to the destruction of Assyrian palaces. The destruction layer shows evidence of enemy attack, including scorch marks. Another layer was destroyed by fire around 950 BC. However, some houses in Sedato were left intact and the site continued to be occupied, if only sparsely. Though the site had never been entirely abandoned, its redevelopment as a major city was spurred by the Greek immigration around 700 BC. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Tahiti Empire now. So Hattusa was the capital of Hidi.
Alex, I apologize, but I think it's pronounced Hittite.
Hittite, sorry, Hittite.
Yeah, if anybody knows better, correct me.
Yes. These ancient names, so I knew vocabulary. Was the capital of Hittite Empire in the late Bronze Age, founded around 6 million BC and ended around 1200 BC. The landscapes surrounding the city include rich agricultural fields and hills of pasture as well as goods. Smaller woods are still found outside the city, but in ancient times, they were far more widespread. This meant the inhabitants had excellent supply of timber when building their houses and other structures. The fields provided the people with crop of wheat, barley, and lentil. Domestic animals provided meat. In the 19th and 18th centuries, merchants from Assyria and Syria established trading posts there, setting up their own separate quarter of the city. Business dealing required record keeping. The trade network from Assur introduced writing to Hattusa in the form of cuneiform form. At its peak, the city covered 1.8 kilometers square and comprised an inner and outer portions, both surrounded by massive, still visible course of walls erected during 1344 to 1322 BC. So it was a great fortress. And now to the south lay an outer city with elaborate gateways decorated with reliefs showing warriors, lions, and the Sphinx. 4 temples were located there, together with secular buildings and residential structures. And the modern times, they estimate the population between 40 and 50,000 at the peak. And the burning and ruin of the city of Hattusa around 700 BC, the responsible party appeared to have been King Anita from Kasura, which is also part of the Tahiti Empire, who took credit for the act and erected an inscribed curse for good measure. Says, whoever after me becomes king resettles Hattusas, let the storm god of sky strike them. So, of course, that didn't really happen. The city was destroyed together with the Tahiti State itself around 1200 BC as part of the Bronze Age collapse. Excavations suggest that Hattusa was gradually abandoned over a period of several decades as the Tahiti Empire disintegrated. At the height of the empire, they occupied almost 3/4 of Turkey today. And then later on,
it's interesting, Alex. I mean, Hittites were they challenged Egypt, right? Ramses II was a major power, even though he was the first PR manager of his time and absolutely lied about the Kaddish that he won. He didn't win. In fact, there was actually a defeat, if you think of it. It was a draw, but more of a defeat in his power. But it's somebody that challenged Ramses II himself, has completely disappeared from the face of the earth. And it's unheard of, right? What had happened? Did they assimilate? Did they leave? Where are they? I mean, and also their language is actually first Indo-European language registered, right? When they were trying to translate the language, and I think it was a Hungarian or Polish scientist, and they used English and Latin language to translate it, because the first sentence they translated is it says a person would eat bread, and then what comes next? Drink water. So they were able to use the English language or one of the Latin languages to translate Hittite language, which is incredible. With such an incredible culture, completely disappeared from the face of the earth.
Yeah. So yeah, they were very highly developed, and with their language and many other parts. And I think their strongest trait is the location. If you look at the map, the Hidi is right in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. So their location is very important for trade, right? So I would believe that there must be a very rich empire back then. So for them to disappear might have to do with the disruption of the trade route. So just wanted to finish up with the Tahiti Empire. The Sea people had already begun their push down the Mediterranean coastline, starting from the Aegean and continue all the way to Canaan, found the state of Philistia, taking Sicilia and Cyprus away from the Hittites in route and cutting off their coveted trade route. So once again, the sea people took over. This left the Haiti homelands vulnerable to attack from all directions. And Azusa was burned to the ground sometime around 1180 BC. The Hittite kingdom thus vanished from historical records. Much of the territory being seized by Assyria. The end of Haiti kingdom was part of the large Bronze Age collapse. I think that the cutting off of the trade route and the constant attack from the sea people and Assyria, from all directions caused their decline, especially the war with the Egyptians, have greatly weakened them because it was 15 years. And right after that, they had to face, more attacks from Syria and the sea people. I think, and if there was drought, environmental concerns, it must be hard for them to sustain the agriculture and food supply. So now I want to talk about.
Well, Lisa has a question. Can she ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
It's more just a comment. Another viewpoint on that is that the Hittite Empire also had a lot of internal conflict leading up to its actual collapse. There was a lot of usurpation that was happening, as well as assassinations. There were multiple factions that were soliciting support from external foreign states. And also there was a lot internally. It was internally combusting. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, Alex, you've got Assyria, you've got then the Greeks, you've got Egypt. So you've got all of that and drought. It's just like one thing after another. And it was just dominoes that were falling. So that was one point. And the second point was in regards to the language, Indo-European. I seem to recall that the language is somehow related to Hurrian, but I'm not 100% clear on that. So just two comments I wanted to make about that.
The Hurrian language is, what is it? What is that? Is it?
The Hurrians were people that were closely interconnected with the Hittite Empire. I think that they either might have been predecessors or contemporaries. I can't quite remember what their timeline was, but very closely related to Hittites.
It might have been also now, related to Armenian, the Hurrian language that they say it's, or Kurds, very close to Kurdish language at this point, which is also considered to be Indo-European. Sorry.
Yeah, when I was doing, compilation of my presentation, it was hard to, really find each empire, what language they speak and what writing do they use. I think that one of the most, besides the Messenians have their own writing system, the Linear B. The other parts, the cuneiform was popular as a form of writing, which was invented by the Sumerians and then Akkadians and the Syrians took over. And but the language could be Semitic for the Syrians, even though maybe they were writing in cuneiform as writing. So it was really interesting back then, all these different intermingle of culture, right? But I think the Haiti Empire was probably targeted because of its location. Because you look at it, it's right in the middle of it's right in the middle of the trade network, right? So I'm sure everybody wants a piece of it, right? To control the trade, have a power of these areas. I think the control of the trade route is one of the reasons that this Haiti Empire was so great. So
Yep.
where am I? Okay, so talk a little bit about Syria. So ancient Syria had been initially dominated by a number of indigenous Semitic-speaking people. The Ibla, the Akkadian, the Ugarid, and Amorites were predominant among them. Before, during the Bronze Age collapse, Syria became a battleground between the Hittites, the Middle Eastern Syrian Empire, the Mitanni, and and Egypt. Between the 15th and late 13th century BC, with the Syrians destroying the Hurri Mitanni Empire and annexing much of the Tahiti Empire. The Egyptian Empire had withdrawn from the region after failing to overcome the Hittites and being fearful of the ever-growing Assyrian might, leaving much of the region under Assyrian control until the late 11th century BC. Later, the coastal regions came under attack from the Sea People again. They love to attack the coastal regions, right? The late Bronze Age king city of Ugarid, which is the Amorite king, Murapi, sent a letter, wrote a letter, and is preserved on the clay tablet. And the letter stressed the seriousness of the crisis faced by many Levantine states due to attacks. In response to a plea for assistance from the king of Alasia, Ushiwara, the senior governor of Cyprus, responding in letter and says, as of the matter concerning those enemies, the people from your country, your own ships, did this, and the people from your country committed these transgressions. I'm writing to inform you and protect you. Be aware. But Ugarid was sacked. Letter sent from Ugarid following the destruction says, to my lord, thy messenger arrived. The degraded one trembles, and the low one is torn to pieces. Our food in the threshing floor is sacked, and the vineyards are also destroyed. Our city is sacked, and may you know it. Eventually, the entire region once again fell to Assyrian. So there were 8 states in total in Syria showed the evidence of collapse. And, so I think, looking at these records, it was sudden, quick. And, I think the attack, again, is from the Sea People and just how powerful these Sea People were, because Haiti was not a small empire, they're a great empire, fighting with the Egyptians, right? So now I want to talk a little bit about the Sultan Levin. So during the reign of the Egyptian king Ramesses III, all centers along coastal route from Gaza northward were destroyed. And evidence shows Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Acre, and Jaffa were burned and not occupied for up to 30 years. Ina, Hazar, Bethel, Shishmesh, Eglon, Debir, and other sites were destroyed. Refugees escaping the collapse of coastal centers may have fused with coming nomadic and Anatolian elements to begin the growth of terrace hillside hammocks in the highland area. So again, they probably have to escape to safer inlands to protect themselves. And during the reign of Ramesses III, the defeated Sea People were resettled around Egypt and Canaan areas. Egypt have survived the Bronze Age collapse, but reduced much smaller state. There are a total of 9 sites in Sultan Levin that show evidence of collapse. So it was a lot. So now finally, we're going to talk about the possible causes of the collapse. One possible cause is the volcano eruptions in Iceland suggests that have caused the general northern hemisphere cooling because of the ashes sprout from the volcano caused the deterioration of agriculture, resulting in the famine. Estimated date for the eruptions from 1021 to 1135 and 929 BC. So this might have reduced the rain and the sun, and the cooler temperatures, in that region was not suitable for growing agriculture. It would become difficult. That's one possibility. And the second one that we talk about a lot is drought, because it's proven that the era was marked by large-scale migration of people at the end of the late Bronze Age. Scientists state that the contraction of interior forests was because of drought and not due to an increase in the domestication and clearing of land for agricultural purposes. In the Dead Sea region, which is Israel and Jordan, the subsurface water level dropped by more than 50 meters. According to the geography of that region, for water level to drop so drastically, the amount of rain the surrounding mountains received would have been very, very little, dismal. In addition to the spread of drought across the region, drought in the Nile Valley has been thought to also be a contributing factor to the rise of sea people and their sudden migration across the Eastern Mediterranean. It was suspected that these crop failures, famine, and the population reduction that resulted from the lackluster law of the flow of the Nile and the migration of the sea people led to the new kingdom of Egypt failing into political instability at the end of the late Bronze Age and well into the Iron Ages.
Alex, I just wanted to add that
Yes.
usually during the Ice Age, the humidity is dropped significantly because a lot of moisture is trapped in the ice. So
Okay.
the cooling off the climate usually leads to a drought. So that's just to support of what you were saying, that probably both of these things were happening. It was a
Yes.
cooling off and the drought as a result of it, and the dropping of the sea level.
Yes, I think it was a combination of these factors. And yeah, I think that's why the evidence have shown that these might have contributed to the rising of the sea people, the migration out of their cities to find new lands. And let's see now, in terms of culture-wise, the impact of the ironworking, beginning with the precautious, ironworking in present-day Bulgaria and Romania in the 13th and 12th century BC, suggests that iron, superior to bronze for weapons manufacturing, was in more plentiful supply, and so allowed larger armies of iron users to overwhelm the smaller bronze-equipped armies, such as the appearance of the massed infantry using newly developed weapons and armor such as cast rather than forged spearheads, the long swords, a revolutionizing cut and thrust weapon, and javelins. The appearance of bronze foundries suggests that mass production of bronze artifacts was suddenly imported in the Aegean. Such new weaponry, a chariot army is no match as raiders began to conquer, loot, and burn cities. So it was a change of warfare that might have caused the defeat of these city-states empires against the sea people or with each other because of the advancement of the technology in warfare. So there's a new theory called the general system collapse. And I'm not sure how much of this is true, but basically it says that the growing complexity and specialization of the late Bronze Age political, economic, and social organization in together made the organization of civilization too intricate to re-establish when disrupted. That could explain why the collapse was so widespread and able to render the Bronze Age civilization incapable of recovery. The critical flaw of the late Bronze Age are its centralization, specialization, complexity, and top-heavy political structure. These flaws then were exposed by socio-political events, such as revolt of peasantry and defection of mercenaries, fragility of all kingdoms, democratic crisis and wars between states. Other factors that could have placed increasing pressure on the fragile kingdom include piracy by the sea people interrupting maritime trade, as well as drought, crop failure, famine, and may have to do with the Dorian migration. So I don't know what you guys think about this new theory that the high complexity of the society is actually very fragile and cause the collapse. Not sure.
I mean, yes, it's plausible, obviously. Like you said, the trade and like you said, right there, Howard wants to answer that as well. Howard, go ahead.
I'm just noting the fact that the civilizations that survived, particularly the Assyrians and the Egyptians, again, are watershed civilizations. So they're located in bodies of water. They're doing irrigation and flood control, and they're wealthy as hell. The guys that were destroyed were not hydraulic civilizations. They were probably copying a lot of the political institutions and stuff. But that means A, they weren't as wealthy. B, their cities weren't as necessary for survival. And so I'm kind of curious again as just to what extent did the agriculture collapse? If the city is burned and destroyed and the farms remain in place, in a sense, the majority of the population would be doing subsistence agriculture, and they may well have survived. They wouldn't do writing, they wouldn't build church temples, but they may well still be there. And the cities being destroyed by their barbarians may well be an active nuisance for all we know.
I think the drought must have impacted agriculture together with the sea people invasion. And I'm sure everybody in that region was so scared of them coming, especially the coastal regions, right? So I think, are you going to wait until the enemy come to escape, or are you going to escape first before they come, right? I think a lot of people might have chose to escape, before they come, and some of them who stay, try to fight with them, will destroy and burn the ground. So I'm not sure the agriculture, definitely the agriculture, there was a drop of agriculture because of drought, but I think eventually, like you said, Assyrian, Egyptian, they're very close to the water, easier for resources, but the other states were coastlines, they were not as much resource to the water.
If I may add, I think, like, for instance, Assyria and like the areas of Mesopotamia that is kind of removed from the Mediterranean were probably not subjected to the attacks from the sea people as well. But yeah, I personally believe that there was a change of climate, the cooling off, and causing the drought and major shift in migrations, and sea people were probably pushed by maybe other people moving from the north, as well as the change of crops. There is a theory about why Neolithic Age started when it's started. And the theory, it basically goes that the people knew about prior to what they call this Neolithic Revolution, they already were familiar with agriculture, but because it was an ice age, that they weren't able to live off the crops. And that's why it didn't really take until the warming up started to happen, approximately maybe 10,000 BC, between 8 and 10,000 BC. And at that time, agriculture became, became a major source. So you could settle, and now you could live off the crop and expand because of the change of climate. So that's the main theory. And we even talking about the areas of Mesopotamia as well. Could it be still? Yeah, so that's the main theory why Neolithic Age or revolution, what we call, which is related to the use of agriculture and settlements, started when it started. it started because of the change of the climate.
Yeah, I agree
More
with,
moisture,
yeah,
more, warming up, more moisture, land, more available land.
yeah. I mean,
And yeah.
right. I mean, I was thinking, imagine just if the only difficulty they had was drought, but there was no sea people, I think they could have survived. They could have grown different crops that require, less water. They could have built, more irrigations into their land. But it was a sudden rise of the sea people that they had no time to deal with drought. They have to
and those sea people could be all kinds of people from Mediterranean that started to gather into larger groups and looking for new lands. So yeah, including Greeks.
I don't want to cut this short, but I want to thank Alex. This was a really, really, really incredible, detailed presentation. We all enjoyed very much. Unless there's any kind of questions that Alex can answer, we can open up for that for a couple of minutes. Or and Sid saying thank you for the presentation. A lot of people said thank you. Alex, this was a really incredible. Kind of put it all together for us and present several theories, and I hope in the future, you would come back and rejoin us also and do a couple of more presentations. Really enjoyed, very well put together. Thank you so much, and thanks Flaw for navigating today as well. I just wanted to read through some of the upcoming presentations that we have, so if you guys are interested, for example, on Wednesday we're going to do meditation on Marcus Aurelius' Stoicism. If anybody's interested, I posted some of the readings. Maybe it's a little late, but you can just join. It doesn't have to be prior knowledge. We're going to talk about history of Stoicism. It's really, really, really taking on right now, life of its own. I think there's about 40,000 groups within Meetup alone on dealing with philosophy of Stoicism. That's going to be on Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Then on Saturday, Howard, who you saw today, is going to present Third Punic War and Third Macedonian War, destruction of Carthage. It's part of our Roman history. And then if you guys want, join us for Ukrainian Museum on Sunday, 28th at 12 p.m. And if we have enough seating, we'll, join us also at Mary Vanna Russian restaurant. So nice to see in person people, stuff like that. On the 30th, Rich is going to continue on his Middle Eastern side. He's going to talk about Ottoman growing pains. And then in December, we have a bunch of them. Like, for example, William Marshall's life, which is, one of the noblemen who was actually Norman. And he lived in England in around 1300s, 1200s. And he lived through many kings. And Andrew, my friend, is going to present his life. We're going to have over 100 people on that one. So do join us. And then our Hanukkah, present for everybody. We're going to do Maccabean Revolt and Plotomy. Anybody want to join us as well? And Alex, again, this was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much. Very detailed and a lot of the interesting facts. And then if somebody wants to see the recording of this and maybe even ask Alex a question through a YouTube channel, you can post that and I can direct everybody to YouTube channel through our meetup. And then and I'll post where the recording is, and then the discussion will take place. And Alex, you're welcome to join and answer people's questions on the YouTube channel, or have a discussion to continue. And because you provide a lot of the good points of discussions as well. I appreciate that so much.
It was a lot of information, and I haven't gone to the Bronze Age in China. I don't know if that's something that you guys would be interested in, because it has some relationship to, the Bronze Age in the West. So that's something is interesting to explore. But I don't know if this would be an interest for the group.
You want to do one of these?
I find it interesting.
Yeah, sure.
I know this. I know what you're doing here today moderately well. China is complete mystery to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
That's
Yeah.
that's great. So we'll do Bronze Age in China, I guess, next time.
Oh yeah, that would be very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
It might piss off the Communist Party, but
fine. That's why
No,
we are here.
don't matter. We already pissed them off. We're like Snowden here. We're like we pissed off Russians. We pissed off Chinese. Don't worry about it.
That's why we are here. But Alex, I think it's not only the Bronze Age in China is interesting. The transition from Bronze Age to the Iron, I think that's very interesting to me. Actually, I think. Yeah, that's another. I don't know what's your research, but I would like to see your opinion or your research on the advance of the Iron.
That's potentially that subject is potentially extremely weird and interesting. My understanding is that ironworking appeared somewhere in Anatolia, and at almost the same time, it appeared in Southwest Africa.
But also in China, though, I don't know how does it come out, the iron, the Iron Age. Because when you use iron, you can mass produce a lot of weapons. Okay. So that causes a lot of problem, That's my understanding,
Well, you can mass produce pointy sticks.
yeah, actually, the Iron Age did not totally replace the Bronze Age. So it was because bronze, is more beautiful, like what the Greeks said.
But bronze is more expensive.
He separates the Bronze Age from the Iron Age, and before the Iron Age, it was the golden period. Yeah.
There are lots of things bronze does well. If you look at any turn of the century precision machine like cameras or anything like that, all the small fiddly machine parts are made of bronze. And bronze is still used extensively. It's compared to steel, it's a lot easier to machine. It's also got a relatively low coefficient of friction. It does have positive qualities.
But bronze is expensive, though, compared to iron. Bronze is much more.
Well, this is why, if you look at precision machine stuff now, it's probably aluminum, which is cheaper and also easy to machine.
Yeah, but it's much harder to produce iron weapons, for instance, because it takes you need much higher temperatures to smelt iron than bronze, and that's why they knew about iron way before, but they didn't develop the technology how to smelt it. And even at the time when they started to use iron, it was not always superior to bronze because it took much longer to develop technology to produce high quality iron that became superior.
So, Greg, do you think iron is more expensive than bronze?
No. Iron is not more expensive. It's just in the ancient times. I'm talking about it was harder to produce because you need high
I'm talking
temperatures.
About ancient time. You say ancient time, the iron is more.
No, iron was much more available than bronze all the time. There is so much more iron than copper. Even more iron than copper by far. And they knew about it. They just couldn't smelt it. Couldn't make anything out of it for a while. Technology didn't develop.
Yeah, I believe in China, they continue to use bronze for a lot of important ritual artifacts, sculptures, and
it's easy to work. Like look at ancient Greek armor. It was quite intricate, and a lot of that was bronze. So it does bronze. There's a lot of stuff bronze does well. It also, in modern times, it conducts electricity rather well.
Yeah.
So it does things well. And for example, if you're doing castings, if you're doing investment casting for sculptures and stuff, again, the lower melting temperature is really useful. So,
but the iron is better at weaponry, right?
If I'm clobbering with a sword, I'm better off if it's an iron sword. But for that matter, they also make positive iron. I'm not sure when that's
Do you think the iron you can make a lot of weapons? If you do it bronze, you probably cannot make a lot. That's my understanding. Yeah.
The volume low, yeah.
Yeah, the volume. So after you properly use iron, you can wage a war, okay, for like 100,000 people. But in the Bronze time, the war is like a gentleman's game. You can only have like a few hundred, okay, thousand.
Well,
very expensive.
okay, I've been through the ancient Egyptian section. So I'm Canadian. I'm in Toronto here. The Royal Ontario Museum is huge, although maybe not by New York standards, but it's pretty big. And if you go, and I go through the ancient Egyptian section, and the weapons are typically not metal. They're carried clubs. You can take a spear, burn and sharpen the end of it and stick it in the fire and burn it and make ash and burn it, and that makes it harder. There's all I can't remember what it's called. There was a New Zealand a movie out of New Zealand about Maoris, and it's amazing what the Maoris made weapons out of. There's no problem making weapons. And you can also, there are some YouTube channels, you can search Lindy Bage or somebody called Scalagrim, and they buy weapons and try them. You can watch them chopping and bashing things with a brass sword. I'll list it here.
Yeah, I got your point. My concern is more, well, my interest is more on like when can human wage a large scale war, right? Like 100,000 people. Yeah.
Well, the problem there is not iron. The problem there is the economic wherewithal to support the troops. You have to raise the troops and they have to stay alive. If you can't feed them, they die.
So you don't think that's a weapon? That because
your problem, yeah, you realize that the guys that are really important in a war, the guys that knows how, in many cases, are the guys that know how to dig latrines.
Actually, I think there's a little gossip in history that
well
that the I think maybe Zach, maybe was covered before that the Muslims, the name of the sword, like a half moon or something, huh?
What, scimitar?
Yes, was so superior that when there was a king who, was it the French king or the British king who tried to invade them, the other king just cut his sword in half. And,
the Richard was presenting that was on the, there was Richard the Lionheart and
that's right. It's a good, I don't know if the story is true or not, but it just shows that. And then later,
a lot of it is made up.
And then and later on, as I was researching about the bronze in the area, because it has kept like a secret for centuries of how they made that kind of sword, what kind of material was in it. And it was so strong.
European swords went through a transition. Apparently, the Saxons did the same. Did the Damascus effect? They took several types of metal and hammered on them, wound them together to get this layered structure. But then the armor changed, and I was watching Terry Jones's History of the Crusades, and they were discussing King Richard's sword. And the guy described it as a sharpened crowbar. You're using the sword on people. You're using a person who's lightly dressed. On a person who's lightly dressed, you want something very sharp. If you want something, if you're clobbering somebody who's wearing a lot of armor, you need something sturdier and heavier. And they mentioned Richard breaking his sword, but he broke it on some rioting Sicilian peasants. And in my opinion, Richard quite correctly hit them with the flat of the sword, not the edge. If he'd hit them with the edge of the sword, it would have been better for the sword.
Oh wow! So there's a I know the Muslim sword was good for cutting. Basically, it wasn't stabbing, and there's certain ones that were good for stabbing, and then they had different purposes, so to speak.
And I also heard that the best sword were actually produced by the nomadic people. Like the tribal people in for example, Eurasian steppe cultures, the nomadic there, Middle East.
Right.
I don't know if that's true or not.
I'm seeing a lot of literature claims that the Japanese katanas are grossly overrated. Apparently, the Japanese didn't have good
Yes.
steel, so they had to do a lot of fancy fabrication stuff to cope with it. I'd be really, really careful of that. I've seen some articles on European cavalry sabers, and apparently during the Battle of Waterloo, the British idea was you had a big curved sword and you whack them over the head with it. The French idea is you had a straight sword and you charge at them and stab them. And what happened is the French soldiers came home with all kinds of head injuries, and the English soldiers came home dead. They actually realized the French soldiers the French sabers were deadlier. And by the First World War, cavalry had everybody pretty well switched to straight swords for cavalry sabers.
Mhm.
And the idea was instead of clobbering them with the sword, you ran at them with the point and stabbed them. So you think through tactics a little bit. The other problem is if I'm the sword I use while riding a horse, I've got to be able to get at people that dive on the ground, and I'm probably going to have a brief opportunity to slash at them. For example, if I stab somebody, I've got a good chance of breaking my sword or losing it. So slashing is a good idea. The Roman gladius is a very short stabbing sword. You sort of get very close to the person, then you run them through with it, and it makes a nice big hole. So there's tactical assumptions.
So why is
How you use the
javelin?
weapon.
Why is javelin a superior, weapon than the previous?
I would argue that javelins. Okay, you're dealing with what I like to call Shaka Zulu's rule. Shaka Zulu realized that Zulu tactics consisted of throwing spears at each other, and he said, "That's dumb. I'm just going to walk up, put the guy's shield aside, and run him through." In a sense, if you throw a spear at somebody, they'll pick it up and throw it back. Now, Shaka Zulu's rule doesn't necessarily apply to bows and arrows because the other guy might not have them. For example, with the English in Europe. The English are the only guys with longbows, at least until they started fighting with the Welsh again. Maybe some fancy like ninja stars or something like that require skill that your victim doesn't have. But I think javelins are great for throwing at deer.
Okay.
Alex, on a different subject, when would you like to do this Asian? Sorry, Howard, I apologize. When would you like to do this bronze and age in Asia? You want to do it next year, or?
Actually, it's gonna be much shorter than this presentation.
It's fine. It could follow by the discussion.
Because I already have it prepared. I was hoping to talk about it as a comparative, kind of culture. So next month is fine.
Next month, okay. I'll pencil you in on one of the Sundays if that's okay.
Okay.
All right, cool. I'll send you a couple of days and you let me know what works. Again, I want to thank you, and again, everybody, thank you for participation. Thank you for great questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I wanna wish everybody a nice evening. Howard, thanks for addition. Drought, thank you for presenting. Everybody, thank you for participation, and then we will see you tomorrow next presentations, which is Wednesday, Saturday, and the next week and stuff like that. This year we have another 15 of them. So
one last question for Jason, because in the beginning you asked me if bronze was developed in China independently or from outside.
Yeah,
what is your opinion?
I don't know. That's what I'm sure, but I kind of I agree with you because the Western used bronze are much earlier, at least like over 1,000 years, right? In China, the bronze has been used in the Shang Dynasty, which is about 1500 BC, or at least 1,000 BC, right? So I think like if you talk about the time, 1,000 years, 500 years, probably enough to travel from the Middle East to China, right? So that's very possible to get the idea, But of course, people may have a common idea by chance happen. I don't know, but if put a time frame on that, it could be start from Middle East or the Mesopotamian area, and then
But don't underestimate people doing it. Go ahead.
Sorry, do we know of any Silk Roads that
I mean,
led from
no,
west.
there's no Silk Road, but I think that the situation is the human they will talk, right? I will mainly probably take like let's say 20 years that the one girl married to the neighboring village, right? And another 50 years, another girl married to another neighboring marriage. So probably take about 500 years that the message of using this transfer to China. That's my own idea.
Two things here. The first thing is the Indians in both North and South America were making bronze.
Oh yeah, so that's why
they definitely did that. They definitely did that independently from Europe, and they may have done it independently from each other. Now, second interesting point is, start off topic, I'll get it back on topic quickly. I built cabinets for my bathroom, and I did it designed them and built them from scratch. And I had to hang them on the wall. So what I did is I put a plank on the back and I cut the thing at an angle, and I put one half of the plank on the cabinets and I screwed the other half to the wall. And as I got ready to mount the thing, I'm thinking, oh shit, is that a good idea? And I started investigating to see what the professionals do. And it turns out I reinvented the French Cleat. Exactly how they do it. And it looks like I'm a complete genius until you realize you're looking at you have a certain set of resources available and you have a problem, and there really aren't very many good solutions. So it's probably been, the French Cleat's probably been invented dozens of times. You can look it up on the internet. They've probably been invented dozens of times. It's probably been invented hundreds of times.
Yeah, it's possible being invented 100 times, but we don't know. We just chatting, from this idea. But for sure, Chinese using bronze much later than the Western.
Yeah,
but apparently, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but remember the first one of the first point that I pointed out was the lack of resource of tin. The deposit of tin is not everywhere, and that encouraged the trade between continents. So yeah, you could say that, oh, we invented, maybe some parts invented the bronze independently, but I still suspect that because, they have to get the materials and they had to find, and the trade, and that's how the technology kind of spread. I still kind of believe that.
No, that's a good point. That's a great point. Anyway, guys, I just want to, again, thank you, Alex, and thank you, everybody, for a great discussion. And I'd like to wish everybody a nice evening. And I will see you, and I will schedule the comparative to, Bronze Age in Asia, which is a little bit later. It's going to be in December. I'll throw a couple of dates for Alex, and then we will continue this. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Good presentation.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.